Welcome to Burning Platforms, our regular look at the politics of technology brought to you by Capita's Centre of the Public Square. I'm Peter Lewis. This week we meet Jess Scully, the Global Director of RadicalXChange, a bold initiative to invert tech power. But first, our regular look at the latest tech news with panellists, Digital Rights Watch Chair Lizzie O'Shea and Health Engine CEO Dan Stinton. Well, that was fun. We're back from our lap of Australia, back in our virtual abodes, having really enjoyed spending some time on stage with Lizzie and Dan in his private club in Perth, which was a personal highlight of mine. But welcome back, guys. It was a great experience. Lizzie, what do you take away from that little trip around the country?
Oh, I met so many interesting people who are really on the same page, I think, as me in a variety of ways, which is obviously great, but also I think have quite interesting and novel things to contribute to this discussion. So I was really grateful. Like I was talking to artists and like a teacher who's having to work with AI lesson plans. I was talking to like a machine learning specialist who told me my slide on machine learning was wrong, but I'd done a good job. So, all this kind of stuff, which was very rewarding. And I think there's real scope for us to work with lots of different people going forward. So I was really grateful for the experience.
And it was really heartening, the people that were coming out of the woodwork who sort of told us that they listened to this, because sometimes we feel like we're just talking amongst ourselves. But some lovely, discussions, both, particularly after the events where there was some alcohol involved, and some stickers where we got people to pick a team between the regulators, the resistors, and the other one, the reimaginers. We've got a reimaginer about to join us here in Jess Scully. But Dan, Perth was great fun, so thank you for having us over there as well. It was just great to be having those conversations in real life.
Yeah, I probably took something similar away from it as you and Lizzie. It's great to actually engage with people and have a conversation with the people who care about these issues as much as we do. So that was awesome. I also took away from it that I need to be better at booking flights, particularly to Adelaide, and not book the wrong day, which is what I did. So sorry, I missed that one.
No, that gave us a fair bit of, you may be our tech bro, but you can't work an iCal. So that was very much appreciated by all and sundry at the Bob Hawke Centre. So
yeah,
you were there in spirit.
I'm glad we've talked about it again another week, a week later too.
And joining us in Sydney was the fantastic Jess Scully, the freshly minted director. I'm going to give you the title. Change if I'm wrong, tell me. RadicalXChange. So, Jess, it was great to have you up there in Sydney as well, and particularly talking about culture, and then having that amazing artist Annie Hamilton sing for us at the end. It was pretty special, wasn't it?
Oh, it was fantastic. It was such a great vibe in the room. So I really appreciated being there, and I was stumped by the games as well. I think they were pretty instructive, just revealing how if you're not listening close enough, these tunes, these robot tunes, they can sneak into your playlist, and you might never know. So it was really fab having Annie there, giving us her perspective and the performance as well. So thank you for having me.
At the end. And thanks for everyone that was part of it. It is energizing, and obviously we want to build on that momentum and keep this being something that helps inform people about the grey areas between what sometimes is cast as the certainty of technological change. I know that's one of your passions, Jess, and we'll talk about RadicalXChange in detail in the second half of the show. But let's start off with some of the news that's been happening while we've been gallivanting about the place. The first bit, Dan, actually happened today, and sort of on the point of artists, a bit of a win for performers with the announcement from the government today that the tech industry's push for an exception to text and data mining is not going to be happening in Australia.
Yeah, this is such welcome news and hot off the press, or at least at the time that we're recording this. So a bit of background, the federal government has rejected a proposal effectively to create a copyright exemption, which would effectively allow these large language models to freely use Australian creators' works to train their systems. And so the AG, Michelle Rowland, she's indicated that the government will instead push for a new licensing and payment regime so that AI companies must reveal and pay for the copyright material used to train their models. So I guess similar to an APRA scheme or something along those lines. And this comes, as you touched on, Peter, this comes off the back of the Productivity Commission, who earlier floated an idea that text and data mining exemptions should be part of the Copyright Act, and effectively enabling commercial AI training on copyrighted works without authorisation. And it also comes, with support for something similar from the Tech Council of Australia's chair, Scott Farquhar. Although in fairness to Scott, I think his position was a little bit more nuanced to that, and he floated the idea of an APRA type scheme as part of this. But nonetheless, this is a massive win, because I think we're seeing now the government are really taking a stand on two things. I guess one, firstly, on transparency and giving us, it's been unclear about how they're going to do this, but giving Australian creatives and copyright holders the ability to find out whether their creative works, music, books, what have you, were used to train these models. Because at the moment it's a big black box, right? So that in itself is, I guess, probably the thing that I like about this the most. And I like it especially because, if you compare this argument around that the large language models have around their training data being proprietary and giving that away would give away their trade secrets. We've heard that argument before from Google and Meta and many others previously, right? And look, I'm sure it's true. I'm sure that it does weaken their commercial position. But I think at some point, if you're starting to direct a material amount of traffic around the internet, impacting on the digital economy, impacting on the information ecosystem, then at some point you have to say that the trade-off of their commercial interests versus the wider interests of the public is not worth it. And so this is the first part of this that I really love. Like, that transparency has the potential to really change things for the better. Yeah, and then secondly, obviously there's a commercial outcome from this too. And again, but unclear about how this is going to work. But if we can get a system in place which is similar to APRA, where if creative works are used to create new AI-based material and they're used as a basis of that, there should be some fair compensation to the creators that underpin it. So I love this. There's lots of details still to be included, but I think it's a really positive step in the direction. And again, I think one that is unique to Australia. I haven't seen anyone else in any other jurisdictions doing this. So it's hopefully Australia will lead the world on this.
Lizzie, there's still some questions, though, about whether, despite the exemption not being granted, Australian courts, I know Cam Wilson was writing about this today, haven't actually tested the proposition whether they can still claim some sort of fair usage. Are you as upbeat about this decision to not do something really, really bad?
I think you've got to take your wins where you find them. So I see this as a success, like it's a defensive win, I suppose. This was something that was being pushed for by the tech industry, let's not forget, pretty strongly. And then the productivity came in behind that call. So I think it would have had a real chance of being made policy if people hadn't expressed a disagreement to it. So I think if you don't fight, you lose. So I'm grateful for everyone who took a stand against that. Lots of creatives did, obviously, and we've been trying to do our bit. But I think it's worth celebrating that. There are, of course, a lot of complexities around how copyright law is enforced in various countries. It comes about as a result of treaties and the place of the infringement, not necessarily the place where the copyright holder resides. So there is a lot of complexity about that, and I think there's still some open questions about what the government could do to better protect creatives. Copyright, I think, warrants its own kind of separate analysis about what its weaknesses are and what could be done to protect creatives better. But for now, at least, I think we've staved off something bad. I think there's a campaign to be one on better protection for rights. And I'm happy to talk to creators about who want to work on that as well.
Yeah. One of the things that really struck me as we went around talking to those young musos was, though, that even without the data mining, the business model's pretty broken anyway, Jess. We had artists who are having close to 100,000 downloads a month, which sounds like a lot of people listening to you, and it's basically just beer money. Like, it's probably not even covering the writer. So surely there's a catalyst for some bigger ideas. And I know you've had some bigger ideas. You shared them with the stage in Sydney about how we could rethink the collective, contribution of creators.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think this is one of those moments where we've had, as Lizzie said, a defensive win. So something significant hasn't been given away, but we're sort of defending quite a broken status quo by holding the ground that we're holding. And if we're thinking about the value of the data we create, and we have to note here that we're just abstracting and minimizing art and creative output and human expression down to data when we talk about it like this. But if we think about it as data, individually, that data doesn't have that much value. It's the collective benefit of having all of that work together in a way that can be, mined and that can be used for LMMs to train on. So we need to think about the way we campaign and activate and create rights or licenses in a different way as well. We have to think about the collective agency that we have as creators, or that creators have. And so one of the things that RadicalXChange has been working on is this idea of sectoral data bargaining, and more broadly contributing to this idea of the data commons. How do we have different ways of organising and sharing our rights in order to exert some kind of market power? It's kind of akin to the unions and labour power. We need to find a way for creators to work together, and then to be able to set their own licenses or terms, or the use cases that they're happy to sign on to for the content that they create. And all of that can be achieved much more easily now through using the technology as well to help to assign and allocate and manage those rights, and through smart contracts and things like that. We just have to start thinking differently about the rights that we have and how we share them in common.
Yeah, and just to round off the conversation, Dan, I know that you'd originally flagged a less uplifting story about Spotify doing AI deals with a number of music publishers. So this is not the end of the story, is it? And the what do we call them? The village is still at threat.
Yeah, well, this is the thing. Before this announcement, which is a welcome one, came through today. Yeah, I was intending to talk about the deal that Spotify had just done with the major music labels around the world, effectively to develop AI sort of products and content, using artists' work. I guess on one level, it's good that they're trying to work with the artists to do that. I guess just, the idea though of creating AI art from real music or AI music from real music is just putrid to me. So I don't know how to feel about it. I mean, it feels like, they're trying to take a step in the right direction, but it's kind of accepting this narrative, again, that Lizzie loves, of this is all inevitable. And so let's try and make it less shit, but it's still pretty shit in my mind.
I think you should be able to opt out of having to listen to AI generated music. Like, you should have the choice of not doing it. That's what I think.
Well, it would help if it just wasn't, if you at least knew that it was AI generated though. This has got to be the start, right? Like
label and then choose platforms that give you real humans if that's what you want. Like, surely this is going to open a market for something better.
I'm going to give you one anecdote and then I'll move on. Sorry, just bear with me. I went to a gig last night. So Gregory Porter, who was amazing, and I overheard a conversation from the guy sitting directly behind me, who literally told me this story. He said he was listening to this jazz album on Spotify earlier that day, and loved it, and then realized after the fact that it was AI generated, and all of a sudden he hated it. And that's the point, right? Like, let us know in advance, please.
And it was interesting. Like, a lot of people were we were doing this, is it human or AI, contest. And a lot of people were getting it wrong, but that didn't mean they loved the music. It was just more a tell. I think there wasn't a single one of the artists who came up who didn't have more people thinking they were bots, but it just shows how wicked this problem is. Anyway.
I think on the point that Dan's just made as well, like, the interests of artists are not aligned with the streaming platforms at all. And, Cory Doctorow and Rebecca Giblin have a fantastic book, Choke Point Capitalism, about this very point, the fact that actually all of those big labels are co-owners with Spotify of that platform. And so their interest is in squashing and crushing what the artists actually get out of the platform. So I think, if we could use this, if artists and advocates could use this to campaign and raise awareness of of the crappy deal that artists are getting, then maybe this could be an inflection point where we could say, actually, here are platforms that don't exploit artists in all of these other ways, and also all the art on this platform is made by humans. So let's hope it's the way up from here.
Lizzie O'Shea is staring down a digital door bitch at the moment. She keeps getting kicked out of the room and then allowed back in. But you're in at the moment, Lizzie. So do you want to take us, while we've got you, into your little curio for today, which is a report from the Human Rights Commission on neurotech? What the hell?
Yeah, I think this is interesting because this is apparently the first report of its nature from a national human rights institution. So the Australian Human Rights Commission is our national human rights institution, but it looks like not many other places around the world are looking into this issue. So people may not know what neurotech is. Essentially, it's about brain data. So it's devices and procedures that can access, monitor, record, or manipulate brain data. And these are increasingly common in all sorts of fields of human endeavour. So like uses in military settings, for example, in criminal justice settings, but also more commonly perhaps for everyday people at work, for example. And then there's lots of kind of use cases around medical research, like assisting people with disabilities and the like. So it's a growing field. And I think it's good to see our Human Rights Commission taking a leadership position in looking into this. One of the things I think that's interesting if you're a human rights nerd like me is that it brings to the fore freedom of thought, which has traditionally been a right, one of the few rights that's absolute, right? So most rights are conditional. Like if you've come into conflict with another right, then you might need to violate it for a legitimate purpose, right? That's the human rights approach. But freedom of thought has always been considered an absolute right, and it's mostly been associated with religion. But it's getting this renewed relevance around neurotech because this is technology that can potentially influence what you think. So anyway, this report that's come out in recent days from our Human Rights Commission talks through some of these issues and makes a bunch of recommendations. Interestingly, privacy reform is one of them. Neurotech brain data is not covered directly, certainly by the Privacy Act, arguably not at all. And certainly with the employees' records exemption that comes in the Privacy Act, it's quite possible that brain data collected at work is not covered by the Privacy Act, which I think it is true, right? But I think it's not what most people would expect because this can be very intimate information, and it's increasingly, especially post-pandemic, being used at work.
So before you go deeper, what do we mean by brain data? Is it it's from observing how you interact with the computer and then inferring what you're thinking? Is that what we're talking about here?
No. It can be actually sensors placed on you. So there are like helmets that you can use to drive around on a mine site, for example, that might be monitoring your alertness or similar. So it's not even inferred data. It can be directly collected from your brain, and
Like
increasingly
brainwaves.
yeah.
Wow.
There's also, of course, Elon Musk has Neuralink, which is, some of it can be implantable, but it doesn't have to necessarily be implantable to be able to map brainwaves. So this is a developing field of tech. You still have to wear reasonably sophisticated sensors, but they're getting smaller and smaller, which I think is interesting. Yeah.
Wow.
Do I need to explain any other concepts?
No, I'm with you. Keep going.
Yeah, I mean, I do.
So what are we going to do about the brains?
So a number of different things have been recommended, including prohibiting certain kinds of activities like tech that manipulates brain data or neural activity for marketing purposes. I think that's quite clearly something we should prohibit. Dan the ad man might have a different view about that, of course, but I think it's a perfectly legitimate prohibition. Then there's, that's true for kids as well, I think, maybe. Not maybe, but I think that's something that's on the table. Like we could consider a prohibition of that or similar, particularly like if we start to see it used more and more in gaming. And then I think workplace is a really interesting one. Like to what extent are we prepared to tolerate this? I think that the workplace is somewhere where you don't have a lot of rights when you might expect to, and I think we've got to make sure that employee data is covered by the Privacy Act, and that there are restrictions, there are rights to resist surveillance at work, and there are, of course, a number of initiatives around that in Australia, including in New South Wales at the moment. And that would be, I think that's a good way to think about it. We don't want surveillance at work. People have the right to work in conditions of dignity. This doesn't include endless surveillance, including of brain data.
Dan, the ad man, defend yourself.
I think your characterisation of me is unfair, Lizzie, but not for the
cruel and unfair.
Look, we've seen this movie before, haven't we? I mean, we've seen this where the privacy regime that is in place has not kept pace with what data is now being collected. So we saw this online, and all of a sudden, before the law could catch up, the idea of surveilling people online and collecting data and everything they did, and for that company to belong to the companies that collected it rather than to the individuals, has become a norm now that most people have accepted. We're risking doing that with facial recognition technology as well, but thankfully there seems to be a lot of pushback against that because people find that to be particularly creepy. I'm not sure why the online is not the equivalent. The encouraging thing about this, right, is it's, I think, so nascent, and there's already people thinking that this data is not for companies to collect, it's individuals. I mean, the fact that it is being collected at all is perhaps concerning in some circumstances. I'm sure there's some utility to it in others. But yeah, I mean, I think what I like about this is it's getting out ahead of the curve for once, and recognizing that this is probably going to be a really substantial opportunity for companies to collect a huge amount of data, which is about as personal as it can possibly get. And so the ability to say, that this belongs to the individual, or in some cases just shouldn't be collected at all, I think is a welcome step forward. Hopefully this gets some momentum.
So it feels to me like there's very, very limited positive use cases, one of which is disability. So I work with the kids at the Cerebral Palsy Alliance, and Riley, who's one of their powerhouse campaigners, only communicates via eye on a screen. And I could see how this could be totally liberating for him, sharp as a tack, just constrained by his condition. But I can also see it going out in so many other directions that is it worth going down the track for individuals in order with those sort of much, much broader, negative use cases? Like, how do you think about this, Jess?
Interestingly, I, have been studying political philosophy this year because I thought I was too employable. So it was important to
Look
push
at you,
back.
now you've got RadicalXChange.
I never thought it would lead to a job. I can tell you that much. And one of the things that stuck with me from studying justice and freedom and all these like foundational excellent things this year was how workplaces are increasingly being studied as the site of a site in your life that is comparable to a dictatorship, a place where you actually have incredibly curtailed freedoms. And so there's an excellent philosopher, Elizabeth Anderson, who wrote a book called Private Government, How Employers Rule Our Lives and Why We Don't Talk About It. And so when you said, Lizzie, that this was the first kind of use case was that maybe employers would be using this to scrape your neural data while you're at work, that just chimed immediately with me that this is the extension of sort of workplace intrusion into your mind, into your brainwaves. And so that is hugely troubling, but I just can't even imagine our laws being able to catch up with this from a workplace rights, industrial relations and workplace rights perspective. Much less, how you actually deal with the potential manipulation of people's thoughts in other contexts as well. So this seems like an arena that is in need of some really clear, bright lines on, what is just beyond the pale and should be unable to be to be pursued by companies, and how we actually achieve that is the big question. But yeah, scary to think that employers are the first in line to think about how to use this.
What's the status of the report? What happens to it now, Lizzie? Does it go anywhere?
Well, I mean, it's got to be turned into something. I think that we've got to see what, for example, whether it would find its way into any privacy reform. Let's see. What I would say is there are other examples around this. Chile is actually a pioneer in this field, including a ruling that a company had to delete data that it had collected about a specific individual who was a senator. And I think it's interesting that there are other countries who are grappling with this who are further ahead, but also that courts may end up recognizing some of these rights if the legislature doesn't, right? Because like facial recognition, I think people find this extremely creepy and invasive. And in those kinds of contexts, just because there may not be legislative specific prohibitions or red lines or whatever, doesn't mean that a court may not find that to be the case. So I think it is imperative that we get some reform in this space. It's hard to see where this goes without some pretty strong campaigning, but I'm not sure that, I mean, I think there'd be a lot of public support for it. So.
All right. Well, it's my turn, and I cannot control my urge to talk about Sam Altman's wank-bot. Mainly because I find it so sad, but also so revealing about where so-called innovation is taking us. So the little journey map of this was, I think, a week or two ago. Altman put out something on his favorite platform, X, which I think Amy put into the Democracy Sandpit, which was basically saying he's going to treat adult users like adults as his principle, which is that whole freedom rather than regulation. They started talking about how people would be able to start customizing their AI assistant's personality. And then saying for adults that should include permitting erotic content, which I still can't quite. It feels like he's still obsessed with that movie Her, which, he got into trouble with when The Voice came out and he'd stolen Scarlett Johansson's. And all hell broke loose, rightly, because it was like, is this where you're going to take your dream of the future, Sam Altman? And he kind of tried to wind it back without a whole lot of success. A couple of days later, it was like, oh, wow, things really kicked off that debate. And he sort of came back, and he's still doing this. One of the lines is, as AI becomes more important in people's lives, allowing a lot of freedom for people to use AI in the ways they want is an important part of our mission, which again seems really nihilistic or desperate to get more users to meet their flagging share price. So there's been a few responses. Julian Grant sort of put out a quick missive just flagging that there would have to be some sort of pre-work done before it went on the market for under 18s at least. But I just think it's not just that; it's what that technology is going to be doing to human relationships. I also note that California's just been the first jurisdiction to pass laws around AI companions. So, I guess in the shield that is Sam Altman, he's actually creating the demand to get regulation out, fairly quickly. But apart from it sort of creating, the sort of headlines that anything related to sex does, and recognizing that pornography is already driven technology, surely this is a place that OpenAI doesn't need to go at the moment if it's trying to sort of build that dominance. What do you reckon, Lizzie?
Do you think? Because I think they are, it's a business model scratching around for a profitable revenue stream, right? Like this, I think they're pretty desperate to work out how to monetize this, and this seems like a pretty obvious path. I mean, it's going to have very strict age gating, I noticed, and I'm not sure how they're going to do that, and whether people will be comfortable sharing the kind of information they'd need to for such a product. But and for that to be across all jurisdictions, or what they're going to do there. But I'm not entirely surprised this is where it's ended up. I've been going around asking everybody, what is the point of Sora, for example? And the only thing people could ever tell me is maybe a bit of marketing and then essentially explicit content. And I don't know, I'm still asking this question of everybody. So I'm not entirely surprised this is where it's ended up. I think they're under just a huge amount of pressure at this stage of the cycle of this business. And I'm not convinced they're going to be able to deliver a return on the investment that's been made, I must say, which is maybe the beginning of the end of the bubble. I don't know. Am I being naive?
So I did some research on this before you get too excited. I'm not that kind of research.
For research. Yeah.
But so according to Cognitive Market Research, the global adult entertainment market is worth $71 billion in 2025. And the top 3 porn sites, Pornhub, Xvideos, and XNXX, have 5.8 billion visits per month. And so I think this just demonstrates your point, Lizzie. I mean, I think this is just a hugely profitable part of the internet, and Sam Altman and OpenAI want a piece of it. And this is the reason for this is because the economics of AI are different to the economics of the internet for the last 20 plus years. It is not a zero marginal cost business. Each extra user actually costs you more. So you've got to find a way to monetize them in the most profitable way possible. And porn, as it turns out, is a very profitable enterprise. So I think that, you can imagine a world where you can get the kind of audiences which porn sites are getting, but you can get those without having to pay any of the adult film stars. I think that's going to be an incredibly profitable business for them. And, this is all you need to know about this is the reason why they're doing it. And I think Sora is exactly that as well, Lizzie. I think it's them just trying to figure out, look, social media is a very profitable business. How can we have a piece of it? I think we're going to see lots of these things as they figure it out. How much of this is a bubble is, I guess, to be determined. But, it is worth just highlighting this again. Like we don't know whether the economics of this industry stack up. And again, I love this technology. I deploy it in my work. I see huge utility in it. I've talked about it.
Which one? The wank-bot? Or
not this technology. But
all right, thank you.
But thanks for clarifying, Peter. That's an important clarification. But I'm just making the point. Like it's the economics of it are different. I mean, we see this in our business too, right? Like we are selling an AI product which is built on top of ChatGPT. And it's that the profit margins are lower because the compute costs are higher, and so I think we're going to see more and more of these kind of things. It's a logical commercial exploit.
But without wanting to be the moral police, can you have these companies that are saying they're pushing the frontier for a better world, but they're basically just selling porn? Or is it just like Rupert Murdoch putting breasts on page 3 of The Sun when he went to England?
I'm not here defending it. I'm just explaining why they're doing it. Like that's a different question. I mean, I don't know why OpenAI, with the brand that they've got, would go in this direction. I think it really has a massive impact on them. But I think
what do you reckon, Jess?
Well, I mean, this is the thing. It sort of undermines the whole pitch. This is, we've had this pitch over the last couple of years, like it's going to increase global GDP by $7 trillion over 10 years. It's going to, create billions of dollars in cost savings and efficiencies, in enhancing productivity. Is it? If it was doing all these things, why would you be racing to add a porn product as a key pillar of your platform? No pun intended. And it's like, why? If you really are kind of, completely redefining the nature of all commerce and every industry, why would you have to resort to the world's oldest in order to underpin your business model? I mean, it sort of suggests to me that they actually don't even have the confidence that they're going to come up with a business model that will underwrite this massive capital investment and deliver a return on it. So they're just banking on the one thing that they know sells all the time. So it kind of it's defeatist to me, and it sort of plucks the bubble a bit in terms of the hype bubble. But yeah, it's probably a good business move, but it's a terrible marketing move.
I guess they could cross-invest in Kleenex as well. It really went up. But anyway.
I do think the government's got a bit of a problem, because if it wants to start procuring for them, but they're also creating the capacity to do deep fake sexually explicit material, which is for all intents and purposes prohibited by the government, doesn't want it at all, right? Introducing a whole regime for it. That's not just a branding problem. I don't know whether they might have elected to create a whole explicit product instead of this as an additional business, but there is a bit of a problem here if you can't control this, and they've not got a good track history of controlling this kind of production capability, so shall we say. So anyway.
It's one thing to crack down on platforms for not looking after kids' safety. That's another thing to do commercial deals with pornography.
Exactly. Anyway, we'll see.
We'll see. Let's move on. Thank you for indulging in that topic. I won't bring it up again for a while. But let us go. That last bit wasn't even intended anything. Although, Jess, can we get some decorum here? Congratulations on the new job.
Thank you.
What the hell is it? What is RadicalXChange, and what are you setting out to do?
Thank you. Look, I'm getting slightly better at the elevator pitch every day, but it is still a mouthful. RadicalXChange sort of starts from this set of concerns that there is a fundamental conflict between democracy and technology, right? That we're seeing technology being used to undermine democracy all over the place. But what if we could deploy technology and creativity in service of greater participation, of making democracy fast, fair, and fun? And what if we could use new thinking, new mechanisms, new ways of collaborating in order to reshape the very distorted market dynamics that I think are exacerbating the political turmoil we're experiencing all over the world, the massive inequality, the outsized influence of elite forces and powerful forces. So it's a radically optimistic foundation founded about 7 years ago by a political economist called Glenn Whale, built on the work, the thinking of Vitalik Buterin, who's the founder of Ethereum, as well as Audrey Tong, who's the former digital minister of Taiwan, and a whole bunch of incredible people in the network. So we're standing on the shoulders of all these innovators in Web3, in civic tech, in digital democracy, in political science, and in markets. And then we're building a global network of people all over the world who are putting those ideas into practice in experiments of all kinds. And we're also developing policy proposals and suggestions and products and projects that are about showing people how to put these ideas into practice. So that's really why I'm here, to try and scale and mainstream some of the ideas in RadicalXChange and to turn the whole organisation into something that helps us help other people implement some of these very excellent and very exciting ideas.
So give us a tangible example of
Sure.
how that works.
So to give you an example, one of the tools that we're really excited about is called plural voting, for example, which is all about expressing the intensity of your preferences. Like we're pretty lucky in Australia; we have pretty good democratic institutions and systems, but I think we have a very constrained idea, a very limited idea of what democracy is. We show up once every 3 to 4 years, we vote, we eat the sausage, it's done, you're in charge. I chose based on a party and a colour scheme, and you're going to make all the decisions from here on in. We think that democracy isn't working in part because it's been so outsourced rather than being something that's always on, always responsive, and able to capture the nuance of public's positions on different issues. Something like plural voting actually allows people to express the intensity of their preference and to choose more with more nuance and thought between different options, which could help inform policy and government decision making in more thoughtful ways. And because
so is that like the quadratics that we were doing on our roadshow?
It's exactly that. It's based on quadratic voting. So basically you get a set of credits and then you can allocate those credits based on the intensity of your preferences. And this is something we did with the Colorado State Legislature, for example. We've also done it with local governments in New York and in Nashville and other places in Brazil as well, to help with participatory budgeting proposals as well. So to help representatives hear from their community where they want to allocate public funds. So that's one really great use case. There's a whole bunch of other use cases. So there's another approach, which is or mechanic called plural funding. So that's like quadratic voting, but with the added element of having a matching pool of funds. And this is something that's been used to great effect in an online community called Gitcoin. So Gitcoin is part of the Ethereum ecosystem. And over the past 8 years or so, they've allocated $70 million to public goods projects based on this kind of funding model. So essentially, we, as members of the community, we express a preference and the intensity of that preference, and then there's something quite unique about it in that it's not just how many chips you have or how many votes you have, but if you have a lot of different people expressing the same preference, you're more likely to get the winning vote. So the plural voting and plural funding is all about trying to counter majority rule as well, which is another, or the dominance of big fish in ponds, or people who own a lot of capital within certain ecosystems as well. So that's another example of how plural funding has been used before. But yeah, there's a bunch of really interesting examples. There's some interesting work around property rights. So whether that's intellectual property or real property, RadicalXChange has done some experiments on that front as well, particularly working with artists to show us different ways of allocating licenses and ownership over collectively created production. Because when you're in the creative world, almost everything you do is created in concert with other people, but it's quite hard to allocate different rights and license different uses across a large cohort of people. Think of the people who produce a film, for example, or a choir and a composer and a producer in a musical production. So this technology allows those contributors to all set their own settings and their license settings, but also to be compensated in subsequent uses of that work.
So Jess, are you in that last example? That sounds like you're using blockchain technology to do that. Is that a I've been saying for ages that there is actually some utility to this technology, and Peter and Lizzie have largely laughed at me. But it sounds like I might have someone slightly on my side with this. Can you tell us more about it? Like, is this a technology that's underpinning it, or am I still outnumbered?
Yes, and Dan, I think they pick on you. I feel like I've been listening for a while here, and I'm here to back up Dan, because no, you're absolutely right. And I suppose, I was really interested in blockchain and particularly in Ethereum and smart contracts, right from the beginning. I always found it really fascinating. But then I think I was put off the whole ecosystem by the fact that it just seemed to become about scams and speculation. And there was a kind of, Wild West gold boom in this area for a good while, around 2021, 2022, and some of that's still ongoing. But fundamentally, there are some really exciting tools that some people, in this ecosystem are using to fund incredible infrastructure, and also they're prototyping governance mechanisms that, if you're a governance nerd, you should be hot under the collar for the stuff that that DAOs are doing and that people in the Web3 world are doing, because it is remarkable in terms of how we organize in decentralized ways, how we set permissions, how we set kind of thresholds that need to be met before a contract's executed. And so, yes, there's an enormous opportunity to use some of this technology to create safeguards that help communities transact and interact and act together in service of a shared goal.
So can I ask, Jess, what are the thoughts around how the tech is able to be used not just to solicit or collect preferences, right, in a more nuanced way, which I think is a really good use case for this kind of tech, but also like conveying information or discussion, because how you inform that preference allocation is obviously quite important. Like, one of the things I think a lot of people are concerned about is that the information ecosystem is very bad, that doesn't help people make decisions that are informed. Like, I do think some of that concern is overstated, or perhaps underestimates the capacity of people to filter through information that they receive. But I wondered if you could talk about any of the ways in which some of the projects that you've looked at or working on are concerned with that kind of idea, that at least the structures of the information ecosystem that we commonly use don't kind of mitigate towards connection or commonality, or also like how you make sure that good information is easily available,
Yeah.
lower quality information is not,
Look, as somebody who is, I was 14 when I got on the internet. I've been online for most of my life, and yet I am challenged every day by the level of discernment that you have to have now to know whether something is true or not. I can't imagine how stressful it is for someone 10, 20, 30 years older than me trying to make sense of this, or someone 30 years younger than me who's grown up in a world where you're not sure what to trust. So this is a huge, the kind of polluted information ecosystem is a huge problem that we have to address. And so RadicalXChange's ecosystem and network is addressing this in several different ways. So Taiwan is sort of I guess the Taiwanese digital office, or MODA, is kind of like the patron saint maybe of RadicalXChange, and we've learnt so much from Audrey Tong and from all of the work that's been done there in Taiwan. And I met this week an amazing a developer named Billion Lee, and she has a platform called Kofacts that's been running actually since 2016. It was inspired by the marriage equality debate and a lot of the women's rights debates that were happening in Taiwan at the time. And essentially, this is a completely decentralized, crowdsourced fact-checking platform that has been extraordinarily effective and was very useful during the pandemic, as you'd imagine, but has also proven
really successful, isn't it, with Chinese disinformation coming into Taiwan?
Exactly. When you think about Taiwan, it's a little fish, with a very big and powerful neighbour that's not afraid to use disinformation, misinformation, particularly around election times. So Kofacts it's been a huge success, and they've created a bot that you can import into your family group chat. I mean, I could definitely use that in my family group chat. That matches up with the Line, which is the most popular social network and chat platform in Taiwan. And that just helps, actually, Auntie, I'm not sure that that happened like that, or that they're responsible for that. And it's become a trusted source, but it's not a centralized source of power. It's something that's crowdsourced and verified and then made transparent and quite public. So Kofacts is a great example. Something else that we're really passionate about is the idea of bridge building and consensus, starting with bridging statements. Again, this is, using a technology called Polis, and there's lots of evolutions building on Polis now that are all about getting inputs from people around issues, finding common ground, teasing out the nuance, and then building on that common ground. And there's a really exciting evolution of that work, which is called broad listening. So the opposite of broadcasting, broad listening. Has been developed in Japan by a bunch of technologists who were inspired by Glenn and Audrey's book Plurality. And broad listening essentially uses AI chatbots to have a conversation with citizens and say, what do you care about in relation to politics in your local community and the issues that are in front of us, to try and get that kind of deeper engagement and get down to the issues. And then the chatbot also works with another platform called Talk to the City, which helps take those ideas and turn them into something that can be communally shared, and people can kind of get feedback and get a sense of how the rest of the community feels. And there's some analysis that is provided by that platform. And then finally, actually propose the bot and the process actually proposes changes to the policy platform for this particular political party, Team Mirai, which recently was elected in the upper house of the Japanese parliament. So there are lots of different ways that you can improve the information ecosystem, and a lot of them actually come about from people seeing what their friends and neighbours and what strangers think, fact checking them en masse, but then also finding points of connection and consensus. So it's not entirely about sort of stripping out the things or that that might not be verifiable, but actually just adding more voices from the crowd that can help to temper the bad bits of information or things that might be coming from bad actors.
Yeah, you've been an elected representative in Australia. In a previous life, you were an independent deputy Lord Mayor of Sydney, Jess. It strikes me that you got the technical challenge and then you've got the structural challenge of how politics operates at the moment. Just reflecting on your own experiences and your observations, like, where is that going to land in the Australian political ecosystem?
Well, I was going to say, we also have a cultural challenge. Like the cultural challenge, I think, is like 9/10 of the problem, to be honest with you, because we're pretty smug about our democracy in Australia. Like, we think it works pretty well, even though it works incredibly well. We have high trust. We have great institutions. Everyone's happy with the AEC for the most part. But we don't see how staying the same is actually a massive risk in the global environment that we're in and in the information ecosystem that we're in the spiraling atmosphere of polarization that we're in economically, and of course the added conflicts of climate change and every other part of the polycrisis you can think of. So even if we stay the same as we are now, we are at risk of people losing trust in democracy, as we're seeing in our peer nations all over the world. We're at risk of seeing social platforms that where polarization is incentivized by their I guess their incentive structure, where we're going to see more extremes rather than people coming towards the centre. So we have a cultural sort of hubris to overcome in terms of recognising that we have to change things in order to just stay the same in terms of our trust in democracy. And then we also have to change Australians' appetite for being actively involved in democracy. I mean, I'm the kind of person that, calls my MP and shows up at protests, and people like me are kind of cranks. Like, we're not normal, right? And much
You're
less
friends.
Right? I feel like everyone listening to this is part of that crank minority. But we need to have other ways for more people to feel comfortable engaging in participatory active democracy, because it's necessary, I think, for us to have the kind of democracy that can withstand the attacks that we're experiencing from all sides. So the cultural change is massive. And then the institutional change of, you can take as much feedback in the front door as you like, but if the governance structure, if the kind of silos of government are not designed to take on feedback, that feedback will just go sit in somebody's bottom drawer, and it will go there to die, and you'll undermine people's confidence as well. So part of what RadicalXChange does is look at how we support innovators within bureaucracy to make sure that they are able to implement change from the back end.
Jess, what I love about the examples that you've given there is it's such a novel, they sound so novel when we're so used to talking about how people engage online so far, which is largely through social media, right? Where, as you've touched on and we've talked about many times, that it's all about the fight and the algorithm and the engagement and the most sort of conspiratorial content or whatever sort of rise into the surface. And it's the models you've just described are sort of the polar opposite of that, right? That they're a way of getting to the people whose voices are often not heard and making them heard and whatever else. So I've got two questions for you, and specifically in relation to Australia. So I take your point. I don't think Australia is in a position to complain about our democracy. It's probably one of the healthiest in the world for a bunch of reasons. But I take your point. Its stability is almost it could be its Achilles heel in the long run, right? How do you get Australians to engage with this, and how do you get policymakers to care about it? Like, what are you going to do next?
Look, I think it's a combination of things. I think there are immediate use cases, and the work that I'm doing at the moment is really focused on the kind of the hot zones for democratic conflict at the moment. So we've got a really interesting project and event coming up in Ukraine in mid-November that everybody, if you want to spend your Friday night 9 till midnight hanging out with a whole bunch of fascinating people, sign up. I feel like this is the crowd for it. Sign up for our event because this, there are places like Ukraine, Myanmar, the places where the Gen Z uprisings are happening at the moment, where they can there's an opportunity to sort of leapfrog where we are at and go to that next level in terms of democratic resilience and innovation. So that kind of work is kind of obvious that we can do that. It's almost harder to do the reform in places like Australia that are so stable and have such kind of strong institutions, which is wonderful. We're very, very fortunate. But what I think is necessary here is two things. First of all, from within government, supporting those people who are willing to try new things. And putting into people's mind the idea that taking a risk is necessary in order to safeguard what we have now. And the risk is being open to new ways of doing things, taking on feedback, being more transparent and responsive about how we show the working of democracy. So that's the internal challenge. And the external challenge, I think, is kind of a fun one, which is kind of giving people an experience of more democracy in more parts of their lives, right? So what if there was more participatory democracy at your school or in your sports club or in your book club or wherever you hang out? If there were opportunities to try these things in the cooperative that you might be part of, or in any aspect of your life where you're working with other people, I want to make it easy for people to try these tools out and for it not to be strange and foreign. We have to sort of give people more experiences of democracy, because I feel like we're only getting to experience this tiny little sliver of it and then thinking that it's inadequate, when actually if we had more always on participatory democracy, we would learn to exercise those muscles and we'd be more engaged. When you get to a fight like the one that the creative industries are having, around creative content, around art, you see the need for organisation and for community action, for collective action and agency, a sense of agency. Who's going to be there organising people when it comes to our biometric data, when it comes to our health data, when it comes to our location data? There's no clear, defined advocacy group for many of those particular, data sets or important facets of our information life. And if we don't have the muscle to organise collectively and be involved in politics in that way, then who's going to organise us, and where's the public feedback going to come from? So I think it's cultural as well as institutional.
Oh, I mean, yeah, I love that idea. Like, I think Australia used to have one of the highest rates of unionisation in the world. So that was often a way in which people had a say over their workplace, for example. But we've suffered a declining rate of unionisation. And I think there is a real interest in people having their voice heard outside of a very formalistic democracy, which is what we've got. And so I actually think it needs to be exercised. There's a tendency, I think, within civil society for that to be a form of delegated politics as well, like leave stuff to experts to do rather than organising communities that might want to have their voice heard. That is, like, for good reasons as well as bad reasons. That's been a prevailing mode of lots of parts of civil society. And I don't necessarily hold them responsible for it, but there is a gap. It creates a gap, and it shouldn't just be left to right-wing extremist parties or trolls who have lots of money and want to disrupt the system. I think there's also a big role for people with common values. Like, I don't even think they're particularly radical, but they may be at times, and then coordinating to build that consensus is a muscle that you have to exercise. So I'm
without wanting to trigger Dan, it reminds me of the discussion we had with Dan McQuillan a couple of episodes back. But there is a crossover, which is that idea of workers' councils and citizen councils, particularly governing the way technology rolls out. And like the bit that I struggle, because I love this and I've been sort of pushing it without this granularity for a while. It's the access to the technology and people using it, and the cost levels in and all those sorts of things. So it's really important work. I just feel that there'll be overton windows where an opportunity opens for this, and it'd be good to jump all over it. And the creators was one, or I think it still is, because I don't think there is going to be a solution that comes out of not doing the bad stuff, just to round out from the initial.
Look, and we're seeing how damaging it is to let models run rampant and to be the source of truth for people. When it comes to the media, I think it is really, really urgent. I don't think the media is saved by what happened today, and that's such a critical part of our democratic landscape. So, just this week there was that horrific story about the Google AI misnaming someone as a perpetrator of a terrible crime, who happened to be one of the journalists who had worked on it, and it wasn't the first instance of that. So there are a whole lot of really important movements and approaches that need to be adopted in Australia. Just because we've had this one win. Or non-loss, perhaps, it doesn't mean that the fight is over. But yeah, I think one of the challenges is going to be making this accessible for people and making it tangible, and really inspiring our sense of agency that we're important, even though we feel very small in the cogs of this big machine, whether as a nation or as individuals or as a collective of creators or whatever you are. We have a really important role to play, and we could be out in front in the world if we established some new principles and ways of doing things, and if we took risks and actually tried some of these new approaches. Because I had this fascinating conversation with a civic tech funder in the US earlier this week, and she said to me, there's a whole lot of people who are so worried about the ethics of this that they're not touching AI in politics. They're not going anywhere near it. And then there's a whole bunch of people who are just going hell for leather on it. And those are the same people who have managed to really tap into people's the emotive content of politics and the sort of tribal content of politics, and to think about how supercharged they are with the addition of this technology, AI on top of that, while the rest of us are sitting over here still debating the ethics of engaging with it at all. We have to know that this is not, we don't get to opt out. This is happening to us. And we have to, I wouldn't say embrace it, but we have to acknowledge the fact that it's happening, and find ways to humanize and to create our own guardrails and our own alternative models for how we'd prefer this technology to develop.
On that note, which is quite an optimistic upbeat. I don't know if you had one more thought, Dan. It looked like I just cut you off at the pass.
I was probably just going to be continuing on the same theme. I mean, what I love about the work that you're doing, Jess, is that
you just have got a buddy for once. You're just so happy.
Yeah, I've got one. You should come back on the next show and every show thereafter. So I'm not outnumbered. But what I love about it is you're usually tech is still at the core of it, right? You're leveraging tech in the right way, which I would argue is absolutely possible and something which there needs to be more of and more of a narrative around too. So, all power to you.
Can you live with this, Lizzie? We unified you?
I'm not sure. Well, look, I'm happy to have disagreements for the sake of it. Don't get me wrong. That's my line of work. But what I would say is I don't know that we're always that far apart, to be honest, on this stuff. Like anyway, I mean, like part of the reason I'm in this space is I do think there's the potential for these things to occur. Like that's part of the tragedy of it being so misdirected and misapplied.
Yeah. Well, we'll put a link to RadicalXChange in the notes for anyone that wants to know more about it. I feel like we've talked ourselves out, but fantastic discussion, Jess, and thank you both for tonight and for being part of the Sydney event the other day.
Thank you. Could I just give one plug, Peter?
Go on.
So this event that we've got coming up on the 14th of November is called Learning the Future of Digital Democracy, Learning with Ukraine. And of course, so it's got the two halves. It's got the hot and the cold. It's got the sort of like institutional reform, how do we improve the pipelines of receiving information, how do governments get better at implementing it, amazing people from Ukraine, from Taiwan, from Scotland, from all over the world, Japan as well in there. The second half
really get Scotland in amazing places in the world, but anyway.
Scotland's really impressive. Anyway, The second
Yes,
half is kind of the more radical bit, and that is where we're co-creating, we're workshopping a toolkit we're making called the Resilient Democracy Toolkit, which is all about giving people the dummies guide, the intro guide to implementing digital democracy in a whole range of whether contested settings or even stable settings. And so I would love your listeners to be there. Of course, it's free, it's online. You don't actually have to go to Ukraine, and hopefully we'll see some of you there.
Excellent. Thanks, guys. We'll talk in a fortnight. Thanks for being part of Birding Platforms. You've been listening to Burning Platforms. It was recorded on October 30 and produced on Naarm land by Rebecca Connell. Talk again soon.